are able to see my screen.
Yep. Yeah, we're able to see.
Yep. Okay. So, yep. So in the yesterday's class, we discussed about how to create a generic servlet, and just we need to provide only the service method. And as we started working with this, and let me start things about let us see the methods which have been presented here. So if you observe clearly, those five methods compulsory will be there because of the inheritance. One is the edit method. This is the kind, and destroy method, and then service method, and then get servlet info and get servlet config. These are the methods came through inheritance from the servlet interface. And remaining ones, get init parameter, in parameter names. These are the specific methods for the generic servlet they implemented for the some other requirement. Okay, get servlet context and all this. And if you observe clearly, there were two types of init methods been available at here. Okay, two types of init methods. One with zero parameter, and one with one select config parameter. Okay. Let me try to show you. Yep. So this is called as first init parameter. Okay, and this one is called as second init parameter. Okay, and so why we are calling this as a first init parameter and second init parameter? So by default, servlet interface has provided this is the default init method which we should compulsorily use, because when the first request comes, that time this is the method which will get executed, and it makes us servlet config object to be available for us. Okay, there is a lot of use with this servlet config object in future. Okay, so this what advantage of this method is, it's going to make us the servlet config object to be available for us. But if you see here, we are not initiating any config object at here. So if you try to execute this kind of a method, no, there will be no such kind of a um, config object will be available. Okay, so let us see our program yesterday, whichever we did. Yes, this is the one. See, this is the example for the generic servlet, right? So generic servlet example extended the generic servlet abstract class, and only one abstract method is there inside of it. So I executed service method at here. If you observe clearly, am I using any init method at here? I mean, either at least first init method or second init method. Actually, to speak in generic servlet, two init methods are present, right? So this is the first init method and this is second init method. I'm using the two init method. Actually, two init methods are present in generic servlet abstract class, but I'm not using any of them. Am I right?
Yep.
Yep. So then what happens internally? Whenever the container, nothing but web container, first creates the object for this one. Okay, whenever the request comes, it is going to create the object, and then it is going to search for the first init method in this particular class. Which class? Generic select example class. It is trying to search for the first init method. First init method is
So, the int
yeah.
servlet config.
Yes. like this. Okay, this thing is called as a first init method. Okay, this try to search for the first init method in the present class. Do you have any such first init method in this class? No. Then web container, what it will do, it will go to the super class. Which is the super class here? Generic servlet. In the generic servlet, it tries to search for the first init method. Nothing but it comes to the generic servlet, it tries to search for the first init method. Do you have any such method? Yes, we have.
Yes.
So it is going to execute this init method. That's it. And it makes the config object to be available. Means instead of you are going to declare, instead of you have to write all this piece of code, this piece of code is already written by a generic servlet. So the main object of, of this kind of method is we need a config object. Okay, we need a config object. Whenever you're trying to call a method called get servlet config is there, right? Get servlet config. Whenever you're trying to call this method, this is going to return the config object. Okay, if this object to be available, then what it has to be done at the time of initialization, this method has to be get executed. But here in this piece of code I am not writing, so that's the reason what happens is like it will go and check in the super class. In the super class, that init method is present, nothing but first init method is present, so it will go and execute the first init method. Okay, and then let us see another example. Public void init. See, first case is acceptable. If you're trying to write the code as like this, it is acceptable. Okay, and second way of writing the code, okay, this is also been acceptable. Okay, whenever you're trying to write the code as like this, public void init, okay, this is called a second init method. Okay, whenever you're trying to write this kind of a method, then what happens? First, web container is the one, right, which is going to create the object and execute the init service methods. So whenever the first request comes, a web container first creates the object for this servlet, which generic servlet example, this one, it is going to create the object, and then in the current class it is trying to search for the first init method. Do we have any first init method in this class?
No.
No, right? Then what it happens, it will go and search for the first init method in a generic servlet, nothing but this one. Okay, then it is going to execute there, and it makes me the config object to be available. Okay, just by calling the get servlet config method, I can able to access the config method. And then it comes to the current method, current class, and it tries to search for, it executes the second init method without any issues. Okay, by default compulsorily it search for the, by default compulsorily it search for the first init method. It should be available either in your class or in the if it is not been available, it will go and execute in a super class. It should be compulsorily been available. Okay, now let us see another example. Okay, this is also been acceptable because this is not a first in method, this is second in method, so it won't care, web container don't care about this method. Okay, it will go to the generic servlet class, and then it is going to execute the init method with servlet config as a parameter. So and it comes to the again current class, and it will search for, do we have any second init method? Yes, we have. Just execute the second init method and go after the service method. Okay.
Also, always the other init method is always gets executed.
Which one saying this method you're saying?
No, the other, the one with the argument
Yes,
servlet.
yes. This method compulsorily been executed because the config object to be available for you, right? In order to initialize this config object, then you should compulsorily, this should compulsorily been executed. Otherwise, config object may not be available. Web container sets the config object as null. Okay,
What happens if the config object is set to null?
okay. In future, I will show you dynamically how to access the values from the deployment descriptor. Okay.
Okay.
uh, in order to remove the hard coding from the current project, and I want to get the values dynamically from the web.xml, I will write some different kind of a coding there. So at that time, if we don't have the config object, then there will be no use of the dynamic concept here. So that's the reason config object must and should be available for your current servlet. Okay. um, let us try to execute this simple program. So in the web.xml, so I need to use 1/1. Okay, I'm trying to deploy the same application as server by using Eclipse. Okay, now I need to give the URI as 1 because /1 is our servlet name. So let me try to print this value also. It will be helpful for you to understand. Let me try to stop the server and start it once again. I have made the changes in Java file, so we should compulsorily stop the server and start it once again. So here I need to use 1. Yep. See here, if you observe clearly, I'm trying to print the value of the Oracle driver. How it is coming at here? In the service method, I'm trying to print the driver name. How it is coming? I'm trying to call config.getInit parameter as a method. Okay, there I am providing the key. Where is this key and where it is present? Yes. Come back to the web.xml. There is a servlet element, right? Under this element, we have two sub elements, that is servlet name and servlet class. Along with, I can able to provide the specific values to for the particular servlet. Okay, these are the specific key and value. Okay, these are the specific key and value. I can able to use these in my Java class, I mean in a servlet class. So key name is the driver name and its value is Oracle JDBC driver, Oracle driver. Okay, instead of doing the hard coding at here for me, okay, instead of doing a new Oracle dot JDBC dot driver dot Oracle driver, instead of writing as like this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get the value from the XML file. So what is the advantage for me? In future, I'm not going to touch the, let me write it like this. We can use the class dot for name also, right? Class dot for name, driver name. Okay, we can write like this also, right? To load the driver. Okay, in future, I'm not going to hard code things. If I want to get the things, I'm going to get the values from, I will go and touch only the deployment descriptor. Here, whatever the value, for example, I have changed from Oracle to the MySQL, then just like this, so that I'm not going to touch the servlet class. So here, by using this context get parameter, we're going to get the driver name and this will be get published right here. So that we're going to start working with the JDBC code. Not only with JDBC code, I mean, if you want to get the values dynamically from the XML file instead of like, hard coding. Hard coding means writing like this. Okay. This is called as hard coding. In project, we never we never allow to do the hard coding. Okay. We should compulsorily get the values from either from the properties file or an XML file. Okay, so that in future the developers should not touch the core Java files. Okay, those are like very important. The developers should not touch the core Java files. Whatever the change is there, they should do compulsorily go to the XML file and there they need to do the update of a particular value. That's it. Okay, and how you are accessing this? By you first we need to get the config object. In the config object, there is a method called getInit parameter. Okay, by using this getInit parameter, I mean at that time we need to provide key name, init parameter name. By using this, I can able to get the value. Okay, this is the advantage of this config. Means at the time of server is getting initialized, I mean hitting, that time it is going to initialize these objects. Okay, initialize these key value pairs, and these key values pairs are kept under the config object. Okay, servlet config object. Okay, so that's the reason, consider as a case, if this is a null, then what happens? Okay, let me try to see what happens now. See, first, if I didn't provided, let us see. Okay, I didn't provided anything, right? Now let me stop the server and start it once again. Remember, whenever you are doing the changes in the Java file, okay, you should compulsorily restart the server, otherwise changes will not get affected. Okay, let me try to give the one. Yes, I am getting the init parameter value, right, from the config object. Now, next, we can write the second init method. Okay, we can write the second init method and still try to execute this. Let me stop this and execute, start server once again. Server is started now. Let me give the URL. Yes, still I can able to read, right? Now let me do one more experiment. Let me provide the first in method here itself.
Here,
Hmm.
in here is the driver name reserved word in line 19.
Mm, sorry, Ari, tell me once again.
Is the driver name something reserved word?
This is the one. No, this is not a reserved word.
No, no.
This one you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is a kind of a reserved word, but it is a kind of like, input that you're going trying to give, right? As a param. Okay, here how it has to get matched with this one. Okay, it's not a reserved kind of a word. Okay,
But it has to match with the XML.
see, whatever the key that you have provided, in order to access this value, you should provide the same key at here. That's the only concern. Okay,
Okay.
if you didn't provide the correct name, it may not be accessible, right? If that particular key is not available in this list, how it will become accessible? For example, I can able to provide multiple. Okay, driver name, URL. Okay, I'll take another int parameter, username, or username is Durga. Okay, and then give the password 12345 6, consider as like this. Okay, now I'm having the four init parameters totally, right? I mean, four key value pairs. So whenever there is first request comes, that time whenever it creates object, okay, in the config object, these four init parameters will be kept under the config object. Okay, so our duty is we have to access those values by using keys. So how? Simple. URL, just give the config dot get init parameter. What is the URL exactly like that? Here, just like this small case, right? And then string uname. You can give any. Okay, now config dot get init parameter. There, what is the name exactly? User name. We should give compulsory exact name. It is case sensitive. Okay. String password pwd is equal to config dot get in parameter of password. Okay. Now
Mhm.
here what I'm going to do, just my register is driver is registered. Now try to get the connection. Connection con is equal to driver manager dot get connection. Okay. URL username password. Once these I got these, then stmt is equal to con dot create statement. See, this is the way I can able to do the JDBC operation in my servlet itself. One way is like we have to do the hard coding, right? I mean placing the driver name, URL, username, password. Second way is like in the web.xml, I have to provide the init parameters. Okay, I have to provide the init parameters. As four different key values are there, so four init parameters are being required, and these should be present inside the servlet element. Okay, okay. Whenever these are getting executed, this is kind of a, for example, key value. Okay, driver name is key, and this is the value, and this will be stored in a config object, servlet config object. Okay, and so how to access the config object? First we are going to get the get servlet config object. Okay, and then from the config object, if you call the method called get init parameter, and you provide the proper key, then we can able to access the particular value. So this is the way I'm going to remove the hard coding. But how all these things are happening? Because of the config object. If the object is null, then what happens?
Maybe error, exception.
Yeah, null point exception. Okay, and second thing is like there is no way to access the, I mean, there's no way to access all these init parameters, right? So lot of advantage of this config object, so that's the reason we should compulsorily initialize the config object. Okay, that's the reason I'm telling, whenever you're trying to write a class, either you can ignore it writing the init class. Okay, container will take care of initializing the config object. You don't need to worry about that. Or otherwise you can provide the second init method. Okay, in this case also, servlet container will take care of executing the first init method and second init method as well. Okay, consider as a, for example, you guys did the mistake as like this. Let us see.
Hi, Manik.
Yeah,
Yeah. So if we don't provide two methods, like if we don't provide any method, so servlet container will call the generic servlet init method, right?
exactly, yes.
Okay. Let's say we have given here like without argument, right? So
Hmm.
servlet container will call the argument init first, and then it calls the without argument init method here, correct?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Let's say I did not give here any method.
Hmm.
So servlet container will call both methods in the get servlet generic servlet.
No, it will never call the both methods. It mainly, its main intention is like, first it will call the first init method. Okay,
Okay.
and then it will looks for the first init method in your local class. If it is present, it will execute. Okay, and in the second case, it will come to your class. Is there any second init method that you have implemented? It will checks for whether you have
Okay.
implemented. Okay, if you implemented, it will execute. If you didn't implemented, it will ignore it. Okay, it won't care about, because container don't care about the second init method. It cares about the first init method.
Okay. My question is like why we need two unit methods?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some people may get confused too, like, okay, if I didn't provided, what happens now? Some people do like this. Okay, What is happening now when I'm trying to hit the servlet?
Null pointer exception.
So why it is happening? You see, without knowing your, without knowing your understand what you did, you just initialized the first init method. Okay, you just thought like, I'm implementing the servlet interface just like that, and you provide the implementation for the first init method.
Yeah.
Now web container will comes and checks for the first init method in your current class. Yes, it is
Yeah.
there. So then it will execute it. Here it will just execute your method. Web container will not come and create the config object for you.
Oh, web content. What it will send? It will send because it is looking for the argument, right?
Yes, it is looking for, but maybe here the method looks like a normal method, but here they provide them internal implementation to get the config object. Okay, see, whenever if it is like overridden by you, then redundancy, nothing but same piece of code is present in your current class as well as a super class. That is one disadvantage. And second one is it will come and just execute this method. Okay, and it just method is executed, that's it. And the container will not initialize this container. First of all, container will looks for the method in generic servlet, not in your current class. Okay,
Okay.
web container, they designed the program in such a way, like web container program, they want to execute the init method present in a generic servlet, not in your current class.
Mm.
Okay, here what you're doing, you are overridden. Okay,
Yeah.
what happens now, it will never execute the generic servlet init method, first init method. It will execute your own class init method, right?
Yeah.
So container may not initialize the config object for you. Okay,
Okay.
there is a process, like they've written the script in such a way, like if you have written the coding as like this, then only I can able to provide the config objects or request object or response object. If you try to avoid using the proper way, then I am not helpful for you, like that it says.
Yeah. I have a question.
Mhm.
Yeah. Even the servlet container will call the init method which is present in the generic servlet, right?
Yes.
Okay. If you don't provide.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. There also it will send the config null only, right?
No, that's what I'm trying to say. See, container will create an object in the generic servlet, and it is going to assign that to the servlet config interface.
Okay. Only if it is going directly to the generic servlet,
Then
it will create object
create
and
and
it will send.
send. If it is executing in your own servlet, it won't even care about it.
It
I'm not
won't.
responsible for you. Okay,
Maybe they want like not to override the actual.
exactly. Okay, some cases are there where it is required like that. In those cases, yes, we can able to. Okay, and in
Okay.
this case, for example, if still this particular method wants to get executed, then what I need to do?
Here also we are sending null and it will create automatically.
Mhm. Let us see what happens. Now what I'm doing, I'm trying to call the super.init method. I'm passing the config reference. For this reference only, it has to assign the config object. Okay. Now let me stop the server and execute once again. So is it working fine now for me?
Yeah, it is working.
So for that, what I did in extra operation? Again, I called super.init method. So what happens? Again, it will go and call the init method present in a generic servlet class, right? So that's the reason.
Yeah,
Again,
but
means
same question again.
mhm.
Yeah, but we are sending null, right?
See, this is the reference, that's it. Forget about the null or whatever it is. Actually, this is an interface. Okay, for this interface, you're trying to give some reference.
Okay.
You're trying to pass the reference object. For this reference object, it is going to assign the value, I mean config object.
Okay, okay. It will create and it will assign.
Exactly. Container has previous step also. Container has the servlet config object, but it wasn't assigned to your config reference. Okay, in order to make it effect, we have to call the init method which is present in a servlet config, I mean in a generic servlet class. Okay, so instead of writing all these nonsense kind of a things, they said like either you can ignore it or you can write init method as like this.
Okay. Mani?
Yes.
Yeah, we are sending the reference, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we are not. It is we are it we are not. It is not. It. Oh, that method returns. It's a void, right?
Forget about the void or everything. Whether the particular reference is referring the object or not, that's what important for them, for me.
No, no. Normally, if you are passing something in order to get the reference back, you need to. It has to return
Okay,
that reference kind, right?
am I using as like this? Config is equal to like this. If this is the case, your thinking is correct, right? I mean, whatever it is written, it has to be get assigned to the config object, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Then am I calling as like this? No, right?
No.
Something internal
But
operation is
how?
happening, and for this config object, it is trying to assign the select config
Yeah,
object.
but it is going beyond the scope, right? It is going to the super class.
So what? I mean, it will be in the same container only, right? It is not out of the. It is not going out of the container, right? It can still able to access all the areas, heap
No,
area
for
and
the
everything.
public, but
Okay.
public like that will be access one to the class level, right? If it is a static, it can be like you know what I'm asking.
Mm,
You like it's like if it is a static variable, the config one,
okay.
so it can be superclass also can have the same static reference. We can access, but since it is a public, we are passing the config object to the superclass, but
Okay.
superclass doesn't have any scope to the subclass, right?
Okay. Mm, let me try to do as like this.
You got my question, right?
Mhm.
And my only question is like if it is static, the variable can be accessed anywhere.
So if it is not a static, we cannot able to access. Okay, let me throw.
Yeah.
No, I will show you an example. Like it's like no problem for me.
Oh, money, I got it. Yeah, maybe superclass also will be existing subclass, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I got it.
It is just subclass of superclass only, na? And I mean,
Yeah,
how it
correct.
can? Why can't I assign the superclass object to the subclass variable?
Yeah, we can. My bad.
Question itself looks like some irrelevant for me. That's why. Okay. Yeah.
That's my bad.
Okay. So in order to write all this piece of code, then what they said is like, please don't write anything either or public void init. If you want to initialize something, you can write as like this also. Okay. I mean, not only the config object that you should compulsorily initialize. Yes, you can able to initialize some other objects also, which may be helpful for you in the service class, right? I mean, I can able to execute my own piece of code. So for example, in the frameworks you use it to get such a kind of an information. You need to parse one XML file, and you're going to make other objects to be available. Okay, and those objects I can able to use in service method. Okay, in those cases, this zero argument init method is useful for me. Okay, so that's the
Like
reason
you said, like while starting the server, it initializes all the
objects.
default
Yes,
values.
yes.
Yeah.
See, sometimes service method is looking for some other objects been available for it. Okay, okay. Anyway, servlet has provided for some. Maybe if my project specific, I may require some other too. In those cases, yes, this will be helpful for me. Here I'm going to write some piece of code in this method. I'm going to write some piece of code and make all those objects to be available, so that I'm going to use all those at service method. Okay, that's the reason they provide the empty parameters this one in method. Okay.
Yeah, that's so much clear. Yep.
Okay, so that's the reason, and this is an important question, guys. And some interviews they're going to ask what's the difference between the first init method and second init method, how it will be get executed scenarios. I mean, they're going to write one some simple program, and they'll ask like, tell me now config object is null or it is going to have an object. I mean, config variable, this one. Okay, this object is referring to null or it's still can able to access the config object. Like that kind of a questions means they're going to write some simple program for you and they're going to do some mistakes at here. Okay, means nothing but, for example, in previous case I have provided the right servlet config and config is equal to this dot config is equal to config, like that.
Mm-hmm.
they will just they will just try to mislead you. Okay, and they'll tell like, tell me what is the output of this program. Okay, you are going to get such kind of a questions in interviews. Okay, so please be aware of what is the difference between the first init method and second init method.
Okay. Uh, so we can tell the second init method as a user-defined init method, right?
Yes, I mean, it's your requirement. If you want, you can able to write the second init method. If you don't want, yes, if you don't even write, web container will never cares about it. Okay, and first init method, if you provided, then you should compulsorily call super.init and you need to pass the config reference. If you didn't pass, what happens? Generic servlet init method never executed, right?
Yeah, correct.
So that's the reason. Okay, so these are the three ways that we can able to make it to be like, config object to be available. Okay, people sometimes chooses like, if you don't have any work with the init method, okay, you have only work with the service method, then no need to write the init method. Okay, in this case, it's a user requirement. Okay, it's up to you, and you have a requirement in such a way like at the time of executing, yes, my own objects has to be get populated. If that's the case, then provide the zero parameter init method.
Okay. Mani?
Yeah.
Yeah, when the container calls the argument init method, which is in generic servlet,
Okay.
where it stores that generic or what is that config object, where it stores that?
Yeah, yesterday's class I shown you, right? Let me show you that picture once again. You are going to get more idea. That's good. So this is a, okay. Consider this is a web container.
Okay.
Okay, this is a container. Whenever it is getting the request and response object, okay, it will pass to first to the thread. From the thread, it is going to call the init method. Okay, before that itself, when it is getting populated from the web.xml, if you see the web.xml from here only, right, it has to pick up which one it has to call and all, right?
Correct.
It is going to create one config object. Okay, and for that config object, it is going to here for that config object, it is going to create config object which is specific to particular thread. Okay, it is like, per request. If I'm getting request one from one person, then for that one person is going to create one separate thread, right? So all these request, response, and config or context, all these objects are associated with this thread. Okay, whenever you're calling that config object, the one which is associated with this thread will be get called. Okay,
Okay.
in future we are going to get some global objects also. I mean, those global objects are like, available for all the servlets. I mean, if that particular servlet is present inside the container, yes, then anyone can able to access those global objects. So those kind of the objects have been available. Those are called as a servlet context objects. So right now we are discussing only about the servlet config objects. So these servlet config objects scope is up to this thread, means up to this
Mhm.
request. Okay. Container will create, okay, this is called as web container, right? This container will create, but this config object is associated with this thread. Okay.
Okay.
So it may not get confused. For example, if you have another config object also, container may not get confused because whether this is associated with this particular request thread or not. If it is not, then it will ignore it.
Okay. Once the request is done, the thread will like disconnect.
Yes, exactly. But this will be associated with this particular service object. Okay, until your session is timeout, I mean you're getting out of the session, till this thread will exist in the server. Okay, because second time if you're trying to come, you need to access again, right? If your session is
How
timeout,
we
it is going to, yeah.
how it knows like whether it has to access the same thread or different, create a new thread.
That's called a session concept. Okay, in the coming classes we'll see some session concept. By
Okay.
doing that
Okay.
it will get to know. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Like more information.
It's like a kind of a step-by-step process. Okay. um,
Yeah. Okay.
yep. Any more doubt, guys, for the today's class?
No.
Okay. Let me stop the session. Okay.
Hi, Mani.
Yes.